Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and College Process once again. I'm Ed from Principia Prep, and today we're going to be going over the major changes to the new FAFSA form. But before we begin, if you are new to the channel and are looking for additional college content, please hit the subscription button down below. It will notify you when new videos do come out. As well as if you do have any questions in today's video or any of the videos here on the channel, please leave any questions you guys have down below in the comment section. As many of you know, every Friday I take all the questions you guys have, put them into video format, answering them, put them back here on YouTube so that everyone has their answers in detailed format back here on YouTube every Friday. As well as we are still running the James Wilson Memorial Scholarship going forward. So if you guys have any students going off to college and are looking for additional scholarship help, our organization here does what's known as the James Wilson Memorial Scholarship, giving out money to students going off to college every year. If you want more detail about the James Wilson Memorial Scholarship, very simple, down below in the description is the link to the video explaining how our scholarship program works here at our organization. As well as also in the description down below is also our Venmo, as well as our Buy Us Coffee, if you want to help support the channel, allowing us to keep making these college videos for you guys out there. And all that being said, let's jump right into today's video, the 10 major changes coming to the FAFSA form this year. Now right at the bat, as many of you know, as I've explained in many of my videos here, I've been doing this 25 plus years as far as being a college advisor, helping on the financial aid side as well as the admission side, and I've worked for many different colleges in the past. And over my 25 plus year career, I've never seen this many changes happen to any form, to be honest with you. Whether it's the FAFSA form, the CSS Profile, institutional forms, whether it's admissions, Common App, Coalition, none of these forms have had as many changes as this upcoming year's FAFSA will have. So that being said, I'm going to go over the major changes happening this year. As you can see here, I've already put them down here on the right, so you guys have an idea of what I'll be going over. But essentially the entire form has changed. Every listing has changed, all based on different legislation. So I'm going to try to keep the video very simple, very plain, very to the point, so everyone watching can understand the changes and what's actually happening out there. So that being said, let's jump right into the first big major change here, the date. Now, obviously, many of you know, if you've done the FAFSA in the past, if you have a student in college already, you know the FAFSA form has been open every year starting October 1st. You also know, based on this, that I've told you guys year after year after year, I even have a video of this one right here. No matter what, you never start the form the first 2 or 3 days because the site typically crashes. That's going to happen again this year, guaranteed. Because of the fact that every year for over a decade it's crashed, this year they changed the entire form. Everything's different. Starting date is different, and they don't even have a starting date, to be honest with you. They're saying it's going to be open in December. Not December 1st, not December 15th, not December 30th. Obviously, they're going to come out with a specific date soon enough, but the reality is, since they can't come up with a date at this point in time, which means they're pretty much going to launch the site day one without knowing if all the glitches are out of it, unfortunately. So if it is opening December 1st, wait till December 3rd, 4th, or 5th. Let the other people get stuck in there with the site crashing and everything else and pulling their hair and going nuts and taking hours to fill out a form that should really only take 20 to 30 minutes. That being said, when you guys are doing the form this academic year 23-24 in December, whatever date it is, you guys will be using your 2022 taxes. Because remember, we are still following the prior situation as far as taxes. So they're using taxes from 2 years back. So if you think about it, we're in a 23-24 academic year, 2024, 2 years back, we're using the 2022 taxes here. Going forward, that's gonna be the same whether you're a student in high school, i.e. senior, or you're in college, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, etc. Everyone's using your 2022 taxes to fill out the FAFSA form. Now remember, when you are filling out the FAFSA form, you're filling out the 24-25 FAFSA form because you're filling out the form for next academic year. So we're in 23-24, we're gonna fill out the form for 24-25. And then number 2 big change here is the FAFSA form is reducing the amount of questions it's gonna be asking you guys. And I put this here as kind of a sort of, because it is reducing it a decent amount, but it's not reducing as much as everyone's talking about. The way the FAFSA forms worked in the past, typically you had anywhere between 80 to 90 questions, depending on your situation, as far as your dependent student, independent student, if the student's married, if they're not married, if they live with their parents, household size, a bunch of different factors comes into whether before you were doing around, let's say 80 questions versus around 100 questions. Now the form is dropping down to roughly around 30 to 60 questions. But depending on your situation financially is the key here, whether you're answering 30 or so questions or whether you're answering close to 60 questions. And the way it works is pretty simple, essentially. If your income, and when I say income, by the way, in all these videos here, I'm talking about adjusted gross income. Now, if your adjusted gross income is $60,000 or below, you will be in the camp that has at 30 questions or so, because of the fact that most of your stuff will be pulled in by the IRS, or at least now more stuff's being pulled in through the IRS when you guys do the IRS retrieval, which if you guys don't know, the IRS retrieval basically on the FAFSA form means, in layman's terms, they allow you when you're in the FAFSA form to go into the IRS site, connected together by pulling in the students' taxes if they have taxes, as well as pulling the parents' taxes into the students' FAFSA form. What they've done is they streamlined this a little bit, where they basically allowed the IRS to send more answers to more of the questions that FAFSA has, so you guys don't have to answer that many questions. So if you're at $60,000 of adjusted gross or below for 2022, you will have 30-ish questions. If you're $60,001 and above, obviously, you're going to have closer to that 60 question mark. More income, more questions. Now, the big questions that have been taken out of the form are a selective service. So before, last year's FAFSA and going back, if you're a male student, age 18 or above, you had to be registered for selective service. Another question that's been taken out of the FAFSA is the conviction question. So if you've been convicted of a drug crime, what happened is, in the past, if you indicated yes on the FAFSA, it typically made you ineligible for aid. That question's been taken off, so it's no longer a factor in figuring into whether you get financial aid or you don't. So drug convictions are off as far as questions. And the new questions have come in, you might have seen in the last FAFSA form, which are transferring over as well, something they really wanted to kind of test out before they got to this year's FAFSA, the 24-25 FAFSA, was the demographic questions about whether you're male, whether you're female, what your background is, so on and so forth. These questions, by the way, have no standing. They do nothing with financial aid. So if you're worried about answering them, it's going to basically affect your financial aid. It has nothing to do with it. Now, with that part of the way, the reason I said in the beginning of this for part 2 of the new changes, that I put the sort of on here because yes, the question on the FAFSA will be limited. The reality is the schools are still going to want some of them out there. Some of the questions they've eliminated from the FAFSA. What's going to happen is the CSS profile, if the school requires the CSS for schools you're looking at, in addition to the FAFSA form, if they ask for both financial aid forms, the CSS profile will probably ask you guys more questions. So in a weird way, you're swapping out from the FAFSA to the CSS. If the school doesn't use the CSS, or also has what's known as their own institutional form, or some colleges have already talked about, they're going to create their own institutional form. What will happen is the FAFSA will have limited questions, they'll drop down to 30 or 60, but the school itself will then create their own form or ask you to do the CSS to get those extra, let's say 20 or 40 questions they're missing on the FAFSA from you anyway. And of course, one of the big changes here when it comes to the questions is they've actually in the question section, when you guys are adding in the schools you want the FAFSA form to go to, previously, in all other FAFSA forms, you're only able to add 10 schools to the FAFSA form. Now you can actually add 20 schools to the FAFSA form, so they increased it. And then with that out of the way, let's talk about the third big change here, the elimination of the expected family contribution term, changing it to the student aid index. Now, this obviously isn't a big deal for most of you out there, and the reality is, doing this 25 years, it doesn't really make a difference what they call it. Obviously, many of you know the expected family contribution is the number given to you at the end of the FAFSA, indicating how much they expect you can pay towards the cost of college for one student for one academic year. They changed that to the student aid index because in their eyes, the U.S. Department of Education believes this is an easier way of kind of describing what this term means. For me and for most families out there, it means basically the same thing. It just means what they expect you to pay towards the cost of college. Now, the difference here though is there are a couple of changes here in the numbers. When it comes to the expected family contribution number, your expected family contribution number range of what they thought you could pay ranged from $0 to $999,999. The student aid index, that number and that range is changing to negative $1,500 all the way up until $999,999. Now you may be wondering, well, why would they go negative? If you're a non-filing individual, what happens is it automatically, if it indicates on the FAFSA form you're not filing status, it automatically gives you a negative $1,500 to essentially provide you the maximum amount of Pell grants, obviously money given to you by the federal government if you have large need going off to college. So if you're doing the financial aid forms and you get a negative number, don't worry, it just means it's 0. You didn't make any kind of errors. All right, now with the first 3 out of the way, let's talk about the fourth big change here, which deals specifically with single families here. In the sense that if you're a single family parent and you're filling out the FAFSA form for your student, in the past, if your income was $33,000 or below, you're pretty much guaranteed to get Pell grants from the federal government. Now it's been increased to $40,000. So you can now make up to $40,000 adjusted gross income and be able to get Pell grants for you guys if you're single family parents. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the fifth change here, which is a change in the Pell grant formula for married parents, whether it's biological parents or step parents. The way it works now with the new Pell grant formula is actually a benefit for your families as well. From the point of view of before, if you had an income of $50,000 or below, for married parents, you guys are typically getting that Pell grant situation. Now, it's going to go up to $60,000. So essentially you can make to 60 grand of adjusted gross income or below and be Pell eligible. So that is a good increase here. So you guys have more space here for income to be able to get Pell grants from the federal government. Now, keeping with the theme of family essentially here, the sixth change here is they're going to be changing the verification process, verifying more people, and the FAFSA changes will essentially initiate more financial aid verification from the schools and the states. Over the last couple of years, what I've seen is less and less families have been asked for verification. Going forward with the new process, the new FAFSA, 1 out of every 3 families will automatically be verified, i.e. asked by the U.S. Department of Education to the college to double check their information about incomes, about assets, about household size, etc. So more verifications coming in. By the way, 1 out of 3 families was a standard process a couple years back, and now they're kind of just bringing it back. So in addition to that, what's very likely going to happen because of the change in the FAFSA questions being reduced, which I mentioned before, the schools and the states providing you financial assistance are also going to be doing more verification. So they're going to be checking more of the information you put on these forms because there's less questions being asked of you. And then the 7th change is going to be the incomes that are reportable and the incomes that are not reportable. Right at the top, they're not counting any veterans education benefits. That's out of the way. That's not being counted whatsoever. They're also not counting any cash support being provided to the student or the family, what typically was known as in-kind support. In a sense, the way it works is that, as far as the cash was, let's just say you guys weren't making enough income to be able to pay for anything household-wise, and you guys were getting full Pell. What typically would happen is the school would ask for an asset verification or an income verification, basically figuring out how you're able to live if you're only making, let's say, $10,000 a year or $20,000 a year, how are you able to support yourself, which were typically known as in-kind support documentation, showing that maybe grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt, maybe friends, relatives, people were giving you money essentially to help pay for the rent, for groceries, utilities, etc. That's not being counted at all anymore. So regardless of your income level, they're not asking about this anymore. If you're getting assistance somewhere else, doesn't matter. What they're also not asking for is the 529 plans coming in from the grandparents, uncles, and aunts as well. If it is coming from a 529 plan, it's not affecting it as far as it used to. In the past, it would be looked upon as untaxed income on the FAFSA form, but the FAFSA form is no longer counting this asset. And in addition to that, another big change a lot of people aren't really talking about, and I don't know why, it's actually a big change here, is the child support and how it's counted. Now, in the past, the FAFSA has always counted child support. However, going forward, the way they're counting it is as an asset. Before, they counted child support you got as income. And as many of you guys already know, when it comes to the FAFSA equation, I've talked about this in many of my videos, parents' incomes are typically counted at a rate of roughly around 20%, where the assets are typically counted at a rate of 5.6%. So essentially, the counting of the child support as an asset at less than 6% versus counting it at 20% plus, depending on your income bracket, that basically means a 70 to 75% reduction in the amount they count the child support at against you in the world of financial aid. So obviously this is a big benefit here. In addition to that, another big change here, which is an automatic Pell eligibility. If anyone in the applicant's household received means-tested federal benefits in the last 2 years, SSI, SNAP, TANF, WIC, Medicaid, or any federal housing assistance whatsoever, it doesn't matter what your income is, you guys are automatically eligible for Pell grants, which is obviously a big deal here. Now, one thing they did take out, unfortunately, was the free or reduced lunch. So if you do have free or reduced lunch, this doesn't count to automatically get you Pell. It did in the past typically provide the opportunity, very likelihood of getting Pell, but that is now taken out of the equation, unfortunately. And then the 8th change here, which is a big one here, is now they're counting the value of the business you guys have and any farm you have. So what happened in the past was, by the way, every family in the past was asked, do you have a business? What's the value of it? If you have a business and it's under 100 employees, you didn't count it. Also, if you had a farm, they counted that as well, but same situation. That typically didn't count. Now, unfortunately, they are counting the business. So if you're self-employed and have 1 or 2 employees, doesn't matter, you're not over 100 employees, they're counting the business. Same thing with the farm, which typically didn't count. So these 2 changes are big, especially for the farm owners, as well as the self-employed business owners out there. What typically didn't count in the past are now counting on the form, unfortunately. The big change here for number 9 is they're taking away the multiple students in college discount. And obviously it's a big change because of the fact that a lot of parents that have multiple students going to college use this discount to get more assistance on the federal side. The way it used to work was essentially if you filled out the FAFSA form, let's say for 1 student, and that FAFSA form said that that 1 student can afford to pay $10,000 towards the cost of college. If you send a second student in, you would basically drop your number by half. Each of those 2 students would be asked to pay $5,000 and then increasing the space availability for financial aid consideration. That's now gone. So essentially, if you have one student going to college and the form says you can pay $10,000, that basically means you have a second student, you're adding another $10,000, so it's 10 plus 10, you're looking at $20,000 in total between the two of them. So it's a vast difference in change here from reducing it down to half by basically now doubling the cost for you guys. Now there is a silver lining here though. You have to remember, as you watch many of my videos, and hopefully I've educated you guys on the process of financial aid, you have to remember, in the world of financial aid, there's three people giving you money. The federal government, the state you reside in, if you stay in state at a school, in state, as well as the school itself. The states and the schools themselves have already come out and indicated, many of them, they're not going to follow this format. So what you can do is you can appeal this. You can go to the schools after you've been awarded your financial assistance and say to them, we have multiple students in school. I understand the federal government doesn't recognize that, and we're looking at it from your perspective that you guys will recognize that at the state level as well as the institutional level and provide us more financial assistance. One thing the U.S. Department of Education has said is the schools have to accept all appeals. This is one appeal I would definitely be doing if I was a student and or a family, let's call it, to give us the money we should be getting with multiple students in school. And then the last change here, the 10th change here on the FAFSA form is which parent counts. Now this is one that's changed a lot. In the past, if you're divorced or separated, automatically only one parent's financial information count. In the past, that one parent's information was basically up for grabs of who you wanted to choose, because the question would state, where does the student live 51% of the time? And most families just chose the parent who has a lesser income to receive more financial assistance. Going forward, you can't do that anymore. They're not asking you where the student lives the majority of the time. Now, they're not asking you who provides the majority of support. So what that basically means is they're looking at parents that claim the student on their tax return if you're divorced or separated. Something we talked about in the past that very likely this U.S. Department of Education is going forward. They haven't indicated exactly that they want the parent who claimed the student, but they are indicating they want the parent who provides the most support, which means they're following the IRS guidelines. That's the way they're looking to be doing things going forward, which means the IRS looks at it from the point of view as who claimed the student on the taxes. So going forward, if you're divorced or separated, who claims a student will very likely be a key issue you guys have to discuss, because the person who claims a student will very likely be the person that has to fill out the FAFSA form. So just things to think about. In that same realm of thinking, if you are separated, they're now asking for legal separation paperwork. They're no longer taking the word of the parent anymore, which in the past, you guys would just indicate we're separated. They would just say, okay, just count one parent's information. They weren't looking for documentation. Now they're looking for documentation. Legal documentation showing you guys are legally separated. So that's another key component here. It's changed on the divorce and separated side. Those are the 10 big changes I've seen. There are going to be more, by the way. The reason I only covered these 10 is because of the fact that a lot of stuff is still ongoing. It's still changing. But if you guys have any questions, any concerns, very simple. If you want to ask me any questions you guys have down below in the comment section. As you know, every Friday I answer all the questions you guys have, put it back here in video format so that everyone has answers to their questions, as well as on the screen is my contact information if you guys need help in the process whatsoever. If you guys need help with any part of this, the financial aid aspects, the admissions aspects of college process, etc. I help out families with all the different processes. On the screen is my cell phone number. The easiest way to get a hold of me, by the way, is text message. Text me, I answer text messages all day long. Second way is email. I can sit down with you guys one-on-one basis through Zoom and help you out with your situation. Other than that, thank you for watching today's video.